Hello and welcome back. We're pretty much going through our Linux architecture, and this will what I believe is the final installment of this lecture series. But there will be subsequent lectures that will go into some of the topics discussed here and hyper focus on them. So now we're going and looking at the user space. Okay, and we can see it's comprised of user applications and essentially the C library, but we can just really think about it right now as kind of because that C library can go ahead and make some of those help, in those system calls, but we're really just going to be focusing essentially on the user applications. So the user space, okay, and AKA the user land is sometimes how you'll see it being described. So that is a kernel allocated memory space that is dedicated to user processes. And we've already spoken about a little bit, but repetition's good, right? So let's go. A user process, a process that a user directly interacts with. GUIs, server, shell, etc. In general, a process is simply a state or image in memory. So the user space can refer to the memory that comprises the entire collection of running user processes. Okay. Now, how is this collection organized? Okay, all these user processes. Okay, in a modular fashion. This is really cool. And this is what I think, the architecture of Linux has done some really some super beautiful things just for the development community in general, just by having this modular approach. It's pretty cool when you see it all happen under the hood. It's pretty special. So it's modular, right? And the first layer is closest to the kernel, right? So down here. And these are comprised of more simpler tasks: network configuration, communication bus, diagnostic logging. Now, I'm not saying that these are simple, but simple relative to things like the web browser, okay? Because that comprises multiple kind of modules, so to speak. And the layers are built onto each other. So, because usually the diagnostic logging is not going to be referencing one, on the chain above it. Okay, and yeah, that's just kind of how they're built, right? Which makes sense. So the top layer is closest to the user interface, web browser, etc. So process ownership. So every user space process has a user owner. Okay, what is a user? And this is kind of going to be good just from a general understanding of just permissions in Unix as well, or Linux. So user, an entity that can run processes and own files. Processes are said to run as their owner. Okay, so cron d, right, the daemon for cron, is running as root. So that's, if root owns it. Okay, the owner of a process is tied to a certain level of privilege. So here's a good one. Okay, so HTTPD, right? So the Apache web server needs root access to run the main binary if it's binding to port 80, a privileged port. So it needs to run as root in order to bind to port 80. And let's actually, before we go, let's look at kind of the list of all users in our in a Linux distro, right? So we can just do a cut, right? Cut, and then we'll do, say, F1, and then we'll go, let's see, I might have to do this as here, we'll see. Okay, cool. So actually we got it. So essentially these are going to be all the users that are onto the system, right? And let's go ahead. So that's just kind of a command that you can just think of just to be able to see all of the users on a system that can be assigned to a process. All right, so we'll just go ahead and run that again. Okay, and then we can just look at all the processes. Uh, that's because I'm not logged into Red Hat. Okay, so see, There we go. Okay. So let's go ahead. We'll just clear that. That IP is dynamic, so whatever. Okay, so let's do that cut again. Okay, and all right, because I was doing that previous command on on Mac, so that's why I couldn't do the PS with the AUX kind of switches and stuff. So on Amazon Linux, that distro is based on Red Hat, and we can run this now since we're in Red Hat. Okay, and so I just did kind of what I showed you earlier, the cut, and so we can see all of the users out there that can be potentially assigned to a process. And let's go ahead and do it, right? So we can see, for example, actually, it is fascinating because when Apache binds to that 80 port, it goes ahead and runs as root. All right, but then it goes ahead and it spawns all these other processes just for handling requests. So kind of an interesting way, and that's great because it doesn't run all of these as root, just because that might give a requester, that has infiltrated in some way, to the web server, like a somebody through the web browser, kind of too many privileges. So that's kind of a way of privilege management through Apache. But anyways, we see kind of the different users and stuff like that. So just wanted to give a general little heads up. So that is the conclusion. Wow, was took me a good little deal to make that. It's always a lot quicker to record these than to do all the research. But I really enjoy both parts of it, both recording and essentially doing all the research. It gives me a lot of joy to be able to provide this knowledge to people because I am getting this knowledge from others, right? That's just kind of how it works. So I just hope that my version's a little bit easier to digest. So anyhow, I'm really looking forward to these follow-up lectures, right, that I'm kind of talking about right here. We kind of go into the sandboxing and all these other things. And so please stay tuned for all of that. And I really, yeah, definitely wish you well until the next time. All right, talk soon.